announcement type stuff.
Are you starting?
I'm just going to do the announcement stuff real quick.
Do it.
All right, guys. Well, welcome. Good seeing all of you. Glad you can make it out, even though it's the voting day, which I know is crazy. If you're here for the first time, I want to say welcome to you. Glad that you're here. If you're here, you're a part of the family. This is the norm. Every week we get together from 7 to 7:30. There's no real agenda but to get together and talk and to catch up on the week and things like that. And then we have a discussion surrounding what we call a discussion series, which is on the screen here. This month is Where is the Love? It's about God's view of finances. And then the last Tuesday of every month, we eat a full meal together, and there's no agenda but to get together and eat, because we believe that a family that eats together grows together. But there is one thing about this month. If you weren't here this past Tuesday, this month we are not going to be meeting on the last Tuesday of this month because of Thanksgiving. So we're actually going to have our family meal the second to last week of this month. So not next week, but the following week. And it's the one meal of the month where we encourage people to bring things. So we're going to have a sign-up sheet next week so you can start thinking of what you might want to bring, like Thanksgiving type food. That would be awesome. Starting tonight and even starting right now from last week, we're going to start passing around this love check box, which is your way to give and to honor God with your finances. And in the coming weeks, we're going to unroll a way for you to be able to give online also and text to give. But that's just going to start making its way around, so don't feel obligated or pressured, but we want to give an opportunity for people to give based on last week's discussion, which if you missed that, then you can always go on to the website, the blog, and watch the week's recap. So other than that, I think I covered everything. Thank you, everyone, for signing up for Serve 6. If you don't know what that is, then that's a way for you to get involved here at the table. We're going to have sign-ups for that throughout each month, like constantly, because we always want people to get plugged in. So from there, pass it off to Tyler.
Awesome. Well, cool. So as Mike said, we are in part 2 of our discussion series, Where's the Love? And if you've been coming for any amount of time, you know how excited Mike gets when he announces like the title of these discussion series. And if you've been coming for any amount of time, you know that I find it difficult to like be that enthusiastic about anything in my life.
Except me.
Except me. Just making my point though, really. All right, so my point is, this is actually the exception. Where's the Love, I think, is just like the coolest possible title for this discussion series. And I have to just tell this story because Mike and I were kind of like talking about what we were going to talk about this month. This is going back, a month ago, a few weeks ago. And we were going back and forth on what the content was going to be and what format and everything. And I texted him at one point and I said, hey, have you thought about a name for the discussion series? And of course I knew that he had. And he texted me, yeah, where is the love? And I was like, what is he talking about? Like, it's a discussion series on finances. Like, he obviously didn't understand the question. So I like re-asked him the question. He was like, oh no, you hate it. He's like, no, I just don't get it at all. So, but I think honestly, it couldn't be like a cooler, it couldn't be a cooler title for the discussion because it really gets to the heart of the issue, which is that finances are an issue of the heart. And I think, where is the love? We're going to talk about it a little bit more detail, so I don't want to take away from any of the content we're going to cover. But really it comes from Matthew chapter 6 and our theme verse for this month, which basically says that, you can either serve money or you can serve God, and you can't serve both. And really that's an issue of where your heart is. So where is your love? Your finances are a really good indication of that. So I love that. I love that because I think that a lot of times, not to be overly critical, but I think a lot of times when churches deal on this topic, they don't talk to the issue of the heart. They talk to the issue of giving. And giving is sort of the outflow of the heart. So I think, now maybe this sounds arrogant or whatever, but I think that's the better of the approaches, and I appreciate that we've sort of tackled it that way. Before we jump into the interview, obviously we're going to do an interview here tonight. The other big point I wanted to recap from last week, which mainly was that finances are an issue of the heart, was I sort of want to acknowledge something that came up last week, especially for those who weren't here last week. One of the questions that Mike asked was, why is it awkward to talk about finances? Why is this sort of weird? Why does it make people a little bit uncomfortable? And one of the answers that I heard that I thought was really significant and really on point was somebody said, well, it just feels really self-serving when the church talks about finances, right? Because as much as you say, we're not talking about this because we want your money, undoubtedly the service ends with them passing the giving buckets around, right? So it's just, there's sort of that awkwardness. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there and acknowledge that we have talked about that, because that our hope is that that is not the case at all. Our topic here tonight, giving sort of plays a role in our topic here tonight, but the focus of the night is not on giving, it's on financial stewardship. And how can we be good stewards of what God entrusts us to? So that's our topic here for tonight, hopefully.
Next week is giving. So
next week is giving.
Maybe nobody's here next week.
I wasn't going to tell you that.
Oops.
Don't you dare skip.
We know who's here right now. All right. So like I said, the topic is financial stewardship here tonight. We're doing an interview. This is my dad, so I'm very excited to have him here. He didn't do anything yet.
Maybe won't.
But Phil, to the rest of you, you don't have to call him Dad. I'll call him Dad. You don't have to call him Dad. This is Phil, and I thought I'd start out by sort of introducing him to you a little bit, and then I'll give you an opportunity to maybe introduce yourself as well. But if you're anything like me, especially, I'm always a little bit skeptical when somebody gets up in front of me and starts telling me what to do with my life, especially something as sensitive or personal as finances. So if I don't know that person, I'm probably coming in a little bit skeptical. And some of you have had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit, which is awesome. But for those of you who don't, two big things I would tell you by way of introduction is, one, I personally believe, albeit maybe I'm biased, I personally believe that this is the best person I know to speak on the area of personal finances to us in this group, and in particular on financial stewardship. And I think that for two reasons. One is I've known him my whole life. And I can tell you, I just have never, I mean, you guys know, family dynamics, right? You see people, right? You see people like the real person. He's a follower of Christ, and that's it. That's number one in his life. He follows after Christ. That's been very evident in just about every aspect of his life to me. And so I think more than anything, you're going to get a Christ-centered perspective here tonight. So if anything qualifies him to speak, it's the fact that you're getting a Christ-centered perspective. The second thing, and I can't emphasize the fact that this is so much less important than the first, but the second thing is he is ridiculously professionally qualified to speak on the area of finances. You're a licensed stockbroker, licensed life insurance agent. You spent the better part of 40 years in the finance industry. About 2 decades of that was owning and operating your own financial planning and wealth management firms. And you've helped people make decisions in estate planning, tax planning, investment planning, insurance planning, legal planning. You've been involved in church ministries that have dealt with finances. You've sat on the board of the church for many, many years. So I think the combined two perspectives is really why I'm excited that he's here tonight. So I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of introducing yourself, but.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around all of that. But one of my other qualifications is most of you are a lot younger than I am. And I've lived.
All of us.
So the Lord's allowed me to live long enough to have the opportunity to make a lot of mistakes and to learn from those. So I certainly have learned the hard way on a lot of things, even though I've spent my life in this arena. And Tyler touched on it, that I've kind of seen the spectrum. At one point I did financial planning, and then at another point I did exclusively for multimillionaires or multi-decamillionaires. But at the same time, I was heading up the Mercy Fund at our church. My wife always said the Lord did that to keep your perspective from getting screwed up, because you're dealing with all these people with everything, but you've got an opportunity to work with a lot of people who don't have much to do. And the interesting thing about everybody's financial situation, even though the wealth is a lot different on the spectrums, sometimes the issues aren't all that different.
Cool. Well, so the first question I have for you is, so the topic tonight is financial stewardship. What is financial stewardship to you?
Yeah, and it goes back to what Tyler said earlier, that, I try to live a Christ-centered life. And, when you kind of back up and you think, oh, it's finances, and then, you want to think, oh, it's about money or investments or, but when you keep going back and back and back, it really comes back to being Christ-centered. And my life first, I don't know if you have that or not. This is my life first. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. And to me, money is a great way to get entangled up in everyday life. And so it's just a cautionary note that everything flows from your priorities. And so the question is, what are your priorities centered around? And so to me, financial stewardship is all about what the Lord wants you to do with your money. And it's going to be a different answer for all of us, but that's the most basic answer. It's okay to pray about money, and it's okay to look for specific guidance about money, and it's okay to get professional advice about money, but it all comes back to what's the Lord leading you to do.
So I guess one of the big questions I had for you is, why is financial stewardship important? Why is it something that we should care about getting right in our lives?
Yeah, and a lot of this is going to go back to what Tyler already touched on. Mike, I got your logo right away. Where's the love? Because really, the money and how you spend it, and it's not just money. We can hold up money or our thoughts or our time, and all of those create mirrors for us to see who we really are. So in regards to money, you look at how you're spending your money or how you think about money, and it's a huge opportunity to see really what you're about and what's important in your life. So that's why it goes back to, are you living a Christ-centered life? Maybe those are your priorities. If you're not, maybe you got other priorities. That's okay. We're all different. We're all in different places in our life and different places with the Lord, but it all comes back to that.
So, I know one of the things that we talked about when we were kind of putting these questions together and the content and everything was, we wanted to, obviously to go back to what does the Bible have to tell us about these things, right? So, the Bible speaks more directly to the issues of money than many people probably realize. But the other thing we talked about was there's like so many different ways, like the area of finances and personal finances and savings, and it can seem like a lot, right? So, kind of boiling it down into like more manageable, digestible things here. One of the questions I had for you was, is there like a key to financial stewardship? Like if a starting point or a certain, truth that it sort of serves as a starting point for what is financial stewardship?
Yeah, and beyond the scope of what your priorities are and how that's going to determine, how you spend your money or save it or give it, one of the keys is to really come to grips with the truth. That is, good stewardship and financial independence or the appropriate handling of finances, people tend to want to think it's about income. And really, if you look at it and you tear it apart, it's really about how you spend what you have. And that's a hard truth to come to grips with when you don't have a lot of income. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because no matter what income you have, and I saw this a lot when I worked with people in the Mercy Fund, you know, their answer was always, I need to make more money. And sometimes it is. You know, sometimes you have to do that to make more money and make certainly making money is part of the solution. So I'm talking more about the focus and the emphasis is really about spending and come to grips with that, especially if you don't make a lot. There's a verse I couldn't find. I was telling Tyler about it. It says, "Don't be poor." I struggled with that forever. How can the Lord say, "Don't be poor"? Where is it, Mike?
Proverbs.
Oh, very good. You should be a pastor. I won't nail you down on chapter and verse.
Yeah. 11:6.
But you know, it says, "Don't be poor." And the way you're not poor when you don't make a lot of money is you're a good steward of what you have. There's a syndrome. I call it the 25% more syndrome. You know, everybody thinks if I just made 25% more, all my problems would be solved. And the tricky thing about that is, no matter how much you make, 25% more is always 25% more. You know, and I was really busted on that one time. I was reading the Wall Street Journal and I came across this article and it says, hey, here's what everybody thinks if they could make, the money problems would be solved. And it was broken down by income bracket. And I thought, I'm pretty modest, you know? So I look at my bracket and son of a gun. I thought, just what everybody else thinks. If I just made 25% more, then I would be okay. And the interesting thing about that was, no matter what the income bracket was, it was right around that 25% mark. So we're all thinking, hey, we're doing pretty good, but if I could just make more money, again, the focus is on what I make and not really how I spend what I have. There's multiple things that come to mind when I think about the focus is on spending. I don't know if you've ever heard about the book, The Millionaire Next Door. Anybody heard about that book? No? Nice. Gold star. Did you hear about it from me?
Actually, you and my dad. It's my dad's favorite book.
It's interesting, The Millionaire Next Door, and this, again, we're talking about the focus is on spending, not income. It's all about the typical millionaire isn't driving a super expensive car and living in a big fancy house. That a lot of millionaires live in relatively modest homes. Their favorite vehicle for millionaires is a Ford F-150.
Here.
And so it's just another example about it's not really about your income. And if it was about income, I Googled celebrities with financial troubles. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, from Mike Tyson to Elvis Presley. Did you know he had financial problems? Willie Nelson went to jail because he couldn't pay his taxes. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And you look at these people making millions, tens of millions, some of them hundreds of millions, and they didn't fix their spending issues, and so they ended up with financial troubles. And I've probably mentioned some other things to you that I don't recall right now, but they're all related to coming to, go ahead. Did I mention some other things?
Yeah,
too?
well, we talked about the lottery.
Lottery winners. You know, if you Google lottery winners and the disasters they end up with, it's mind-boggling. They end up with divorces and drug addictions and some of them get involved in suicides, and I mean it's really a mind-numbing thing, because the world tells us all the time money's your solution. The more money you got, the better off you're going to be. And we buy into this all the time. I bought into it all the time. And the issue is, how do you spend it? And how do you spend what you have, not necessarily how much you have.
One of the things that, I don't know if we got these slides working again, but Jeremy, can you give me Proverbs 21:20? There should be a slide on there. So this was one, I mean, again, I mean, this just makes its own point, but the wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. I mean, it's right. It's exactly what we just talked about. Two things that jumped out to me about that, though, when I kind of reread it through this lens of financial stewardship, was, you know, I mean, the first is obvious. It's more about spending. You know, right there, it's talking about the fool spends whatever he gets. It's not saying that the wise person makes more money than the fool. It addresses the opposite issue, which is exactly the point you were just making. The fool spends whatever they get.
Actually, the fool spends more than what they get. And that's what most humans do. They spend more than what they get, which we're going to touch on later.
The other thing that kind of jumped out to me was like the wise have wealth and luxury. And I sort of thought through that, like again, the context, like that lens of financial stewardship. And the thought that hit me was, you know, if you spend less than you make, then you start to build wealth, right? Even if it's slowly, incrementally. You know, the wise have wealth because they didn't spend it all. So they had something left over to start building wealth. And the luxury could be almost as simple as like knowing where the money's going to come from the next time an unexpected expense comes at you, right? I mean, so I guess I read it differently than I have ever read that before, and thinking like wealth and luxury doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the celebrity status or the millionaire status that we might necessarily jump to right away, so much as, you know, if you have wealth, that means you have money. You have money in the bank. Maybe a little bit of money, maybe a lot of money, but you have some money in the bank. That's your wealth. And the luxury, I think, is knowing that you have some money in the bank, right? So I don't know. Again, I just thought it was so interesting as you were, you know, because as we were talking through some of these issues, how directly Scripture, you know, really addresses all these same issues.
Anybody heard of Warren Buffett? Yeah. One of the things he's known for is he lives in the same ranch house that he bought when he didn't have any money. And I wonder, do you think there's any connection with how much money this guy has and his attitude about spending, about saving and investing? Do you think there's any connection between the two? I know he's a genius and all that stuff, but this is just one observation I had. You know, he lives modestly and he invests and he's frugal, and this is one of the things he's
He
known
makes
for.
smart decisions on what he's spending his money on. He probably also makes smart decisions on what he's spending his money on in terms of investments. So
Yep, both ways, yeah. He's smart in all ways, yeah.
And I think like when you look at the word luxury there too, the wise spend money still, but they probably spend it on smarter things that result in more luxury than the fool. When they spend their money, it's probably on Nerf guns and pop rocks. So.
You're getting ahead, David.
My bad. Sorry. Just gonna shut up.
No, perfect. I mean, seriously, we're heading there. I mean, you're making the right. I mean, that's exactly it. It's exactly it. Any other thoughts? The next question I had for you was, you know, if the big issue is spending less than we make, you know, obviously you already spoke to the Mercy Fund a little bit and your experience there, and basically some context. The Mercy Fund was at South Hills Bible Chapel, which is where you've gone to church for 30 years.
30 years.
The Mercy Fund is basically a ministry that is set up to help people that are struggling to make ends meet, right? I mean, there's people that can't buy groceries and put food on the table, they can't make next month's rent, and you were in charge of that fund. And part of that was you would work with those people to try to help them start making better financial decisions, right? So I know that you've been around a lot of these people that have made some of these bad decisions. You know, what pitfalls do you see people normally fall into, right? Like what mistakes? I'm guessing there's some consistency there in terms of what mistakes people are making. What have you seen that we can try to guard against?
Yeah, I mean, you won't be surprised by this because what's somebody think it deals with? Spending. On what?
For me.
I don't want to get personal.
This came out.
This isn't confession.
I'm just hungry all the time.
So this is to me what I call my lifestyle steps. You know, people tend to increase their lifestyle in big steps, whether it's a new car, or so maybe they're not the right size on all of them, but a new car or new houses are usually the biggest one people do. And this, we go back to the verse, you spend everything. So this really gets determined by how much somebody makes, right? And they spend it all. And so this is a big pitfall when this lifestyle goes up like this, because it's really hard to bring down. When you buy a house, and you got mortgage payments and real estate taxes and utility bills and maintenance. And number one, a lot of people don't estimate those right. So they think, oh, I can afford the house, and then all this other stuff starts happening because they're cutting it too close. And then the other thing is, one of the things I was going to share earlier, we'll come back to this in a second, was this graph, which I kind of think's funny and I kind of don't think's funny. Anybody have an idea what that is?
The amount of hours I get to sleep at night.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me of a roller coaster, which I love roller coasters, but really that's a pretty close picture of my earnings in my career. And I'm a bit of a risk taker, and I've started businesses and I've started over and over again. But this, if you combine this with locking in these, what happens when I lock this in and my income went like that? So part of what we were talking about earlier was good stewardship is about in times of planning. And I remember when I hit this first peak here, my mom said, enjoy it, make sure you give a lot, and save for the rainy days. And I thought, what a downer, Man, I was feeling pretty good with myself, But she didn't jinx me. This didn't come about because my mom jinxed me. It came about because my mom was wise. She said, days of plenty are partly to be used for days of scarcity. And so one of the biggest pitfalls I see is people ramp up their lifestyle so fast, and it's not just financially difficult to bring down. But I saw this over and over and over again with Mercy Fund people that I would work with, that they would be in a house or something, they can't afford it, they need to move, there's no way they can stay there, but their emotions, they just can't get out of it. My lifestyle's up here. As humans, we take these steps up really easy, and the steps down really hard. And so not only is it financially difficult to adjust this if you move too fast and too soon, but it's really tough emotionally to adjust this too. And so part of what I see, and this is my own perspective, that the answer to your question, long-winded as it is people, one of the biggest pitfalls people have is they spend too much money on their lifestyle too fast. And they create all sorts of problems that lock them into all sorts of problems later on. And you get into a house and you can't afford it and you think, well, I'll just sell it. You know how much money it costs you to sell a house? And what happens is they don't put enough money down on it. So then they don't have a lot of equity in it. And then you look at the closing costs and they go, oh, I can't, if I get out of it, I don't get any money, or if I get out of it, I owe money. And I can't afford to do that, so I just stay here, my expenses are locked in, and so on and so forth. So this is just a rough picture. If you delayed something, I didn't mean to do that dip there. My guess is just my personal opinion. Most people live twice the lifestyle they should be living. It's just my take on where they are. And you know what all this space in here represents? Potential to give, potential to save, and peace of mind. Everybody wants to live up here, and they're nervous about it all the time. Can I make my payments, and what happens if the furnace goes out of my house? Here it's a lot more calm down there. And it really doesn't do much for you in between. All this giving, potential for giving, potential for saving, and peace of mind.
Awesome. I think the PowerPoint hates me tonight. So I found another verse again. I loved how much these lined up. What was 1 Timothy 6:9? It says, "Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction." I mean, the Bible's not pulling any punches on finances. But again, I'm not going to be long-winded on that. I think that you did a great job kind of making all those points. But again, I just think it's so interesting what the Bible has to tell us. People want to get rich. They want to act like they're rich. That's the other thing. People want to act like they're rich, right? Which really was your point. People want to act like they're rich, or they want to act like they have more than they do. And it just leads to foolish desires and ultimately putting you in financial ruin, right? So So let's flip the tables then. So those were pitfalls, those were mistakes, those are things that you've seen people do the wrong way. What is the secret to achieving our financial goals? Let's go in the positive direction instead of the negative.
Yeah, before I get on that, you may have to jog my memory on a question. The other big thing I touched on it earlier is people the fool spends more than he actually gets. So one of the big things is, and credit card debt's a big issue for a lot of people. I mean, you look at the statistics, and people have credit card debt, and in their 20s and 30s, the average balance is like $5,000. Guess what? In their 30s and 40s and 50s, you think it's higher or lower? It's higher. It's like $10,000. And the average person, we're talking about Americans, the average person in America retires with, guess what? Credit card debt. Their whole life, they got credit card debt. And you got 5,000 up to 10,000, and they do tend to bring it back down. The average, I think, in your 70s, can you imagine being in your 70s and still worried about your credit card? It is back down to $5,000. Interest rates are pretty good on credit cards these days, right? I'm showing my age. They're only like 17, 18% now, right? I can remember when it was a lot more than that. But if you run the numbers on an average balance, and by the way, the average balance is even worse. If you take out the people that don't have credit card balances and you just look at the people that do have credit card balances, the average for the whole country jumps to something like $16,000. Can you imagine? But that's what a lot of us do to ourselves. And you run the numbers even at like 17, 18%, if you carry an average balance like that for your whole life, you end up paying something like 5 times the amount for that. So whatever you put on that for that $5,000, boy, I hope you enjoyed it. Because it costs you like 5 times what it should have cost you, because you keep every month, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. You're going to have to remind me of the question. I told you.
Yeah, no, perfect. So what is the secret to achieving our financial goals? Doing it right.
And really, I mean, and it comes from, I mean, we've talked about what's your center of priorities, and sort of walking through that to get to these steps. But really, it's just, I mean, taking it seriously is really, and we're gonna get into this more. And I think we have a verse on this point, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, to me, it's like taking it seriously. The vast majority of people let themselves off the hook. They go, well, I don't have enough money. That doesn't apply to me. I'm in college, I don't have any money. If you're spending any money, you know what's so cool about that is you're forming habits that are gonna haunt you or help you the rest of your life. So even if you got a little bit of money, how you're letting it slip through your hands, and we all let it slip through our hands to one extent or another, you're starting to form habits that you're gonna be haunted by or helped by for the rest of your life. And habits are hard to break. Anybody knows habits are hard to break? That's why they're called habits. So I know we got a pretty wide spectrum here, people in school and people just starting off, and maybe people a little further into their career. But those early habits will set a projectile, and they're hard to break. So once you sort of set that projectile, it really starts a path of either financial stewardship, financial success, or financial ruin. I had a client one time, he climbed telephone poles for a living. And he said, I didn't know anything about money, but my dad told me I should always save 15% of whatever I made for retirement. And so he dropped out of high school, he started climbing telephone poles. It's all he did his whole career, 50 years, he saved 15% of what he had. When he retired, he had $3 million. That's all he did, he just saved money. And the funny thing about him was, I told him, hey, on $3 million, you can comfortably live on like $120,000 a year on this. And he's like, what would I do with $120,000? Like, I had to talk him into taking 60. He's like, I don't need that money, because his mindset was on spending, saving, and yeah. Not that we all want to be multimillionaires. Supposed some of us do. Mm-hmm. you said that out loud. You didn't just think that. But all of us are probably going to retire someday, and so that means you got to save something. Some of us, a lot of us may experience dips in our career, which means you gotta save something. Or we may have emergencies in our life that call for extra money, which means you gotta save something. So I'm not talking about saving to become a multimillionaire. I'm talking about preparing and being a good steward with what you have. You can always adjust later. You know, Warren Buffett is also famous for, he says that he's gonna give all his money away. His kids are gonna get like, I don't know, some small percentage. A lot of money for most of us, but some small percentage of his total money.
Yeah, so I think, you know, one of the things that, and I think you said it was, you know, take it seriously and have a plan. You know, one of the verses that stuck out to me, again, I apologize for the PowerPoint, but, you know, there's a verse in Matthew 25:16 that says, the man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. And that's really the point that David was making earlier is, you know, have a plan. Understand what you're doing with your finances. And that's something that I think we're going to hit in more detail here, you know, is what does a plan like that look like? But, you know, financial success doesn't happen by accident, right? Like nobody kind of like lucks into having, you know, a secure retirement, right? You sort of, by accident, you end up with a bunch of credit card debt. You have to intentionally work to end up in a good place financially.
Yeah, and some people accidentally end up wealthy. They inherit money or win the lottery, but that's, as we talked about, that doesn't really spell success necessarily for them if they don't have the habits to control it. Warren Buffett's famous for saying, I want to give my kids enough that they can do anything, but not enough that they, what did he say?
Yeah. Not enough that they can do nothing.
Not enough that they can do nothing. Yeah, he's heard it from me before. You know?
It's true.
So he wanted to enable his kids to do some things, but not so much that they could just sit back and get in trouble in life.
So I think the final question before we get into, I do want to cover some specifics of what does a plan look like for us. But you know, what's the key to making all of this work? You know, so if we don't make bad spending decisions and get ourselves in trouble spending more than we make, and you know, we put a plan in place, how do we make it work for us?
Yeah, and I don't remember all what we talked about in that regard, but one thing that's coming to mind, so you may jog my memory, but one thing that is coming to mind, which we're going to talk about later, is, you know, and actually I think it's on the next verse.
The discipline?
About saving little by little.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't want to get ahead of us, but
No, that's this one here.
It is.
Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow.
yeah.
You said 4 versus 10%.
Yeah, so, I mean, saving little by little, this is another advantage this group has. You know, early on, you know, the ability to let your money work for you, which is one of our verses, put the money to work. Put the money to work. Wouldn't it be better if it got up and went to work on Monday morning instead of you, Josh? Put the money to work, you know. Well, how you put money to work if you don't have any money? How do you put money to work if all you have is credit card debt? And so, you know, part of that is really amazing on what time will do for you in putting money to work. So I wanted to give you an example of saving $100 a month and assuming 8% interest or investment returns on it, and what that might do for you over time. And so we're going to look, most of us talk about 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and 40 years. So the question is, we're going to do 8% interest, $100 a month. The question is, what do we think that's worth in 10 years? Anybody have a guess?
2.5 million. Oh, in 10 years, I'm sorry, wow. $10,000.
20,000, so not a bad guess. In 20 years, that's worth $60,000. In 30 years, that's worth $150,000. In 40 years, that's worth $300,000. This is
$100 a month.
Yeah, $100 a month. Does this seem possible? I've been doing this for a long time, and I still look at this and I go, I went back and I double checked the calculations. it's mind-boggling what this will do for you. I think you guys the church goes back to financial independence. Dave
Financial
Ramsey.
peace, yeah.
Yeah. Dave Ramsey in his book, Total Money Makeover, has a paragraph in there about new car payments and how most of us like new car payments. And most of us spend, I think in his book he talks about $400 a month on average on car payments for the whole 40 years, right? $400 a month. So if this was 4 times, what are we talking about?
1.2 million.
Who said that? 1.2 million. Now I know we have to have cars, but do we have to have expensive cars, and do we have to have car payments? And I know we all can't do all of this on day one. So one of the challenges is what's the steps that you can start working towards. I mean, instead of leasing a car, maybe the next one you can buy a car, try to put more money down on it, take a shorter loan, and then the next one, a shorter loan, put more money, to work your way out of having to have a car payment all the time. But I think Ramsey, after he gave this example of $400 a month and all this money hanging out there, I think he was a little snide. He said, I hope you enjoy that new car smell. Because, I mean, it gets awful expensive. So this goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier was habits that we're forming. And we don't have a lot of money. I bet you a lot of people in this room could afford $100 a month. But hey, why bother? It's only $100 a month, right?
Where do you get the 8% interest? Because I mean that is not as that came out condescending. I didn't mean it to. I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Because without, I do the math in my head. Without the 8% interest, that's $48,000.
I mean, most bank savings accounts are like 3%. If
Not
if
even.
you're lucky. Yeah,
Right, yeah,
2%.
Yeah, I said interest and earnings. 8% is a lot of money in the stock market, a mutual fund. And a lot of times people used to use 10% in the old days. Now people are toning that down, thinking it's not going to be like that in the future. And that's a whole nother topic of
Right.
mutual fund investing, and how do you invest, and what do you invest in, and how do you diversify, and especially when you start building on this curve, it becomes more and more important what you have it in, and so on and so forth. Where early on it's more important you're saving. That's a whole nother ball game. But 8% is not money that you're going to put in a bank account and get 8%, or buy a bond and get 8%. 8% is a mutual fund, a lot of stocks, something like that can generate some returns for you over time. And by the way, for those of you not in it, stocks and mutual funds don't grow like this. They grow like this. More like my career earnings, but hopefully on the uptrend. Yeah.
Because if you just put that $100 in your mattress, that's $48,000 over 40 years. So you're talking difference of 250. What did you say it was 300? I can't see.
Yeah, 300.
300,000 and 1.2 million.
Yeah, so the 252,000 came from the
Yeah.
interest. So
That-
that's why you shouldn't put it in your mattress.
That guy's in Matthew 25 too. He buried it. I'm serious.
Yeah.
That guy's he's in the story too. He's the fool. And he's saved. He didn't even have a credit card.
Yeah, I mean, that's touching on other issues, because you can be good savers, and especially older folks who lived through the Great Depression, they wanted to keep it in checking accounts or hidden in boxes in their basement. And even inflation, which is relatively low now, that compounding curve, that can hurt you too. If you think about interest card debt and inflation, and that compounding effect can hurt you over time. So if you just save it and you keep it conservative, and you just keep it in your checking, or you just keep it in your safe in your I had an uncle who kept money in an old mayonnaise jar in the corner of his garage. I mean, the money he didn't have just because he didn't put it in a well-diversified mutual fund is crazy. But he, to each his own.
So I think one of the things we really wanted to do was talk about some of the different aspects of a plan,
Yep.
right? So we talked about, basically so far we said don't spend everything that you make. don't increase lifestyle too quick, save money, take it seriously, have a plan, and sort of stay disciplined, I think is really the last point that we made. Sort of stay the course. It works over 40 years, not over 4 years, right? The secret is really in the compounding over a lot of time. So if the secret is to have a plan, help us sort of, what's a plan look like for us? How do we start?
So these are the basic steps I go through when I develop a plan. And number one is set your goals out. And there's a lot of difficulty in setting goals out, especially when you're young and you're not sure about a lot of things in the future and so on and so forth. So one of the things I say is don't worry about where you are, worry about where you want to go. Allow yourself to dream about where you want to get to and what you want to do. And that could be giving goals, could be savings goals, could be earnings goals. It could be anything financial. We're talking about a financial plan. These steps might work on any type of plan, but set your goals out. Very hard to do. That's one of the reasons why most people don't do them. You got to back up and say, I'm going to take it seriously, and then you got to sit down and go, I'm going to write out my goals, and you get yourself a cup of coffee on Saturday morning, and an hour later you're sitting there and you go, I don't really know how to go about this, so, forget about it. So this isn't an easy thing to do, but most people can start doing it, as best you can word it or describe it, do it. And one of the powerful things about goals is writing them down. And there was a Harvard study many years ago where they followed an MBA class and they broke them into 3 groups. And I think it was 86% of them didn't have any goals in their head. They just wanted to get a good education and get a good job. So they would come out and say, hey, where's the best job that pays me the most money? Okay, I'll go there and I'll go. And they sort of formed the baseline of earnings. Again, our goals aren't all about earnings. The point is about the power of written goals. The second group, I think, was the next 13% or something like that. I know you're going to be adding these up for me, right? Make sure they add up to 100. 13%. They had goals in their head. They wanted to be an investment banker. They wanted to be this or they wanted to be that, but they didn't write them down. And they earned twice what the base group did. And the last group, which was only like 4%, and really, it's only about how many will do written goals on plans. But they made 10 times. And it just goes to the power of writing down goals. There's something that happens when you have to clarify it enough to write it down and put it on paper that makes it become very powerful. And I just look at it, how do you, if you're going to get somewhere, assuming you want to get somewhere, how are you going to get there unless you define where you want to go? And it's like, hey, I want to go on a trip. Great. I don't know where I want to go. I mean, it doesn't make any real sense there, right? Second habit of, I don't know if you ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Second habit is start with the end in mind. Before you start spending your money and building all these habits, sit back and start with the end in mind. So this is writing down goals. The second thing is take an assessment of where you're at. It can be pretty simple, it can be pretty complicated. The simple form is in 2 main modes. Take a snapshot of where you are. You can just list out, what do I have? Checking account, assets, maybe some of you have a house, and then cars, and then beside that, what kind of liability I have. So just take a snapshot of really where am I at? This is the best way to measure progress on the financial front. What's your snapshot look like? Some of you may call it net worth or value you have or so forth. And the other big tool on the assessment is how am I spending it, right? So it really goes to a budget. It can include your sources. How much money am I expecting to come in? But it's got to include how am I spending my money? And some of us are inclined to do detailed budgets. So I'm not. Some of us are inclined to sort of map out what we know and sort of educate ourselves on our spending habits by laying out on paper, hey, I can see I paid this much in taxes, I gave this much, and I spend this much on insurance, and so I got some big components that I can lock down by just looking back through things. And then I can sort of piece in, I know I spend this much on this, and so on and so forth. But in this assessment, if you take a snapshot of where you are today, and then sort of take a look at how's money coming in and how's money going out, back to where's the love. I mean, you're going to see the priorities that you have in your life. These are the two basic ways to assess where you are. And then it's really just math from there. If you put some numbers on this goal, and you take a look at where you are, and you come down to your action plan, it's like, well, I want this much for this goal and that much for this goal. Maybe it's to buy a car, or to put money down on a car, or to put money down on a house. And I want to be able to do that. My goal says I want to be able to do that in 5 years. It's not hard math to say, well, I need this much money, divide it out by 5, divide it out by 12, and this is how much money I got to be saving. The tough thing about it is to see how much money you got to be saving. Goes back to the lifestyle steps. Pushing it up too fast, too quick, instead of giving yourself some leeway to sort of work through and take a look at your, give yourself some leeway to take some action steps to get from where you are today to where you want to go. And these last 2 steps, how are we going on time?
10 minutes.
These last 2 steps, really, any plan is good for not a long time. You know, early part of my career, I used to do all these really fancy projections, and then I was really shocked. The next year I'd redo them, and I was like, wow, give me a lot of different answers here. You know, and then I got to the point where I didn't do any projections, because they can be useful, but they can be very misleading too. But every year, I think a year is a good time frequency to go back. How do my goals change? How did my current situation change? What kind of progress am I making? What do I got to do? So you come back, you measure these, and then adjust the plan.
Can I make a quick suggestion? If you guys don't use like an online tool or anything, Mint is like a great way to do all of that. So it's just like mint.com, it's free, but it like tracks all your transactions, you don't have a credit card, debit card or anything. And something that was enlightening for me when I did that assessment, is you actually see where your money's going. For me, I realized I spent like way too much money on that.
And those type of tools can be really useful, because when you do it, when you typically do it, when you get somebody in and you start talking to them and they've never done that before, you start walking down through and they go, well, here's my sources. Okay, here's how I spend my money. And they lay it all down. And you come down to what I call the black hole. And you know what's interesting about the black hole? The more money you make, the bigger the black hole gets. And there's lots of things in the black hole, like overpriced bottled water, right, Josh? Or Starbucks, right, Dana?
Hey.
But it's amazing that black hole just sort of grows with our income and our lack of discipline.
I have 2 questions for you. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Then I did want to see if anybody had any questions for you. So I want to keep an eye on the time. We have like 5 minutes here. One of the questions quickly was, you know, if we're going to set some goals, what are some big goals that you would say, you know, obviously it's going to look different for every individual. The numbers are going to be different, but are there, you know, categories of goals that you would say you should have a goal for this, you should have a goal for that? Again, on the quicker side, but I don't want to rush you. But
I'm too long-winded, you're saying.
that's what I'm saying. That's it.
Yeah, when you set goals, this is the way I look at it. How much you're going to give first. I know taxes come off there, but sometimes the biggest decision is how much I'm going to get. Sometimes you got to pay taxes, you know. All the time you got to pay taxes, sorry. But then, so giving's at the top. To me, really the dream is to put lifestyle at the bottom. Most of us do it the other way, you know. And then in between is savings. And then here's where the big goals come in. Although this can be a big goal too. The average evangelical Christian gives an average of 3%. You know, where's the love? You know, it's savings. When I think about savings, does anybody ever want to retire? We got 1, 2.
I would say, Justin, I want to see your hand, brother.
Some of us have kids that we want to do things for them, like college. Has anybody looked at college bills recently? Like, I'm so happy Jason's almost graduated. Then there's things like cars. You know, if you want to get out of this vicious cycle of paying for everything on credit and everything, then you got cars, or what I call non-annual type things. Things I'm going to spend money on, but not every year. Like when I want to buy a car, or when I want to make an improvement on the house, or something of that nature. And then annual type expenditures. Maybe that's a vacation. And then, I know I'm speeding up, but I need to. Monthly expenses. So, I mean, when you start sorting through this, and you see, hey, between taxes and giving, I mean, what's going to be gone? A third or more? Most people are left with 67%, and they spend 70% on lifestyle. Where's the other 3% go? Credit cards, right? All this stuff, especially one of the advantages you have in this age group is you've got time on your side. One of the disadvantages is you think, I got time to take care of this stuff. I'm not going to worry about retirement, and and then it's not only does it sneak up on you, and it gets harder and harder to achieve it, but you're losing the power of the compounding growth over time.
So my final question for you is just next steps. I mean, what advice would you have to us moving forward? And I have your note here if you want to look at it. But really, I would say regardless of what position we find ourselves in. I'm sure in a room this size, we have some people who say, hey, I don't have any, I haven't done any of this. I don't have debt. I don't have savings. I'm sort of net neutral, right? There's some people here undoubtedly in a room this size that have credit card debt. They have debt working against them. There's some that are getting it right, I'm sure, that are making savings. So, some broad, hey, here's next steps, practical advice, any sort of just parting words for us.
Yeah, without going back over everything we talked about, really there's a lot out there. And there's a lot that we didn't talk about, all the way from investments to tax planning to, it's just insurance. How do you look at insurance? What should you be insuring? How do you really manage your debt? How do you get out of debt? If you're in debt, and some of that's in the financial independence school, they got a debt snowball concept, which is a cool concept, and it probably works for most people. But to me, this is pretty daunting. Anybody think it's pretty daunting? Yeah, it's pretty daunting. So is there a step? And Tyler told me he recently read a book, I haven't read it yet, The Compound Effect.
Yeah.
And I'm just guessing from the title, you take little increments and it compounds on you?
Yep.
Remember?
Now you don't have to read the book. it took me 3 hours.
Remember the compounding curve?
The 1.2 million.
The 1.2 million. How did the 1.2 million start, since you know it all?
$100 a month.
$100 a month.
400.
400. It's 400 to 1.2.
Okay, that's 300,000. Listen, don't put me in the same box as you, okay? I got a big dream.
So maybe the step is, the real point is, take a step. If you go out and you go, hey, you talked about so much, I can't do any of it. I hope you heard a couple of things that you say, I can do that. I can start saving $100. I can start saving $50. You think $100 will make a difference? We saw it would. You think 50 will make a difference? It will. If you got credit card debt, I think they're obligated on the card to tell you how much you can pay to pay it off in 3 years. Maybe that's a way you start working on it. But the real point is here, take a step. Maybe it's giving more. I know I'm slipping into next week, but nobody's going to come next week.
Yes, they are.
Maybe it's giving more. So anyway, all of that to say is, when you got huge projects, one of the ways to get it started is to take a step, because then the next step's a little bit easier and it starts compounding on you. And the other thing is, find somebody you can talk to. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's,
Speaker at the table.
Speaker at the table. Yeah, by the way, I am willing to meet with any of you. You know, I'm not overly qualified, except I'm old, you know, and I've made a lot of mistakes. But this is one of the things, I don't know what it tells me, but I was going to say this earlier. The last time I visited Tyler, it was a couple months ago. Tyler had two big questions. When you were a kid, what did you dream about being? And got you really excited. And now that you're old, what gets you really excited? And I went home, I told my wife, am I like boring? When I was a kid, I dreamt about being a stockbroker. and now that I'm an old man, I really like this stuff. And like, I'm so boring, you know? But, yeah. But I love doing this stuff. But I really love doing it with people who want to help themselves. If you want to help yourselves and figure something out, I'd be more than happy to talk with you. Strictly, extremely confidential, just between me and whoever might want to talk to you. I had the dubious distinction of managing my father-in-law's money, which was dubious. You know, he never had anything to say to me at family reunions until I started managing his money. And it's like, hey, Phil, let's go talk. You know,
That's true.
but when he yeah, how's my favorite stock going? It's like, oh my gosh, you know. But when he came to me, I said, strictly confidential between you and me. Whatever you tell your daughter, my wife, is up to you. Next time he comes out to the house, he goes, hey, Linda, well, I guess you heard, I'm Phil's client now. She goes, no. And I looked at him, I said, I told you, whatever you tell me is confidential. So I've learned to be very, very strict about that, even to the point I'm not even saying who I'm talking to. So if I can help anybody, you can, well, how do I get a number to them?
Well, you'll hang out afterwards. They can come to me. And I mean, I want to make the point. Hopefully it goes without saying, you know, that's not what he does anymore. He's not trying to get you as a client, right? Like this is him offering as part of the ministry, as an extension, as an arm of the table. This is free. This is free. And this is his phone number.
I think.
Which he temporarily forgot.
Yeah. Well, maybe you don't want to listen. So yeah, take him up on that though. Really, I know well enough to know that he's very serious when he says that. It's not a plug for business. He's not trying to get you as a client. Take him up on it, please. Honestly, so much we covered. I mean, that was like a 30,000 foot view, right? I mean, we tried to cover a lot of ground here, and I know we got a wrap. We tried to cover a lot of ground here in an hour, but to say we just barely scratched the surface would be like almost too much. I mean, there's so much to this. If you want to start putting plans like that in place, take him up on that. You know, I would say, you know, I mean, if you want to come to one of us, if you want to go to Mike, if you want to come to me, because you're more comfortable with that, start there. Come to us and talk to us. If you're more comfortable going to somebody that you're not so close to, jump right to him. But we'll get you connected for sure. So take him up on that. Even college students in the room, if you think, hey, I don't have any money, he wouldn't be willing to meet with me. He's willing to meet with you. Take him up on it. Really, it'd be awesome.
Yeah,
I would love to hear that a bunch of people took him up on that offer. So.
Well, you won't hear it because it's confidential.
Yeah, I won't hear it. I would love it if you would, though. So, I know we're over time. Do we want to offer one or two questions if anybody has them, or just wrap?
I have a complete off-topic update. Every clip is at 68, like 4. Donald Trump's at 48. That's the update. That's the update.
He needs to ride home.
Question?
So,
JJ.
For maybe some of the younger people here, I've been hearing it here and there from a couple different people here and there and stuff like that. But life insurance, what do you have to say about that? As far as I know, you said something like that could be like another savings account or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, as Tyler said, there's a lot of complicated things out there. And life insurance can be a whole topic in and of itself. And you mentioned that can be a savings account. It can. I don't hold to that philosophy. I tend to think you buy life insurance for life insurance, you save in other areas, and it can be very expensive. You know who likes life insurance as savings accounts? Any guesses? Life insurance companies. And life insurance agents, they love life insurance policies as savings accounts. It can be an expensive way to, it can be good in the right situation. because there can be some tax advantages to it. So if you're maxed out on 401k and different things of that nature, it can be in the right situation. For 80% of us, maybe 95% of us, you're better off getting term insurance for a certain period, staggering the terms so you don't have everything riding out your whole lifetime. You can drop it off over time anyway. I don't know if that answered your question, other than there's a lot in there. Yeah.
Phil, I'm Braden. Just want to appreciate you for coming here and talking.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate the time. It's humbling that you guys would spend the time with me, so thanks.
Well, clearly, you spent your life doing this, so you have won a lot of expertise in the field, and so yeah, you spreading that love around to us is appreciated.
Great, thanks.
What?
Sorry, I do actually have a question.
You're just buttering him up first.
So my question is, one of the things that I struggle with right now is I sit there and I play around with the amount of money that I do want to put into my 401k to save. But then I also know at some point I do want to buy a house. And I know the PMI insurance goes along with that. And so if you don't have 20% down into your house, you end up paying a considerable amount more towards it. I'm curious as to where the balance is, and I know it's choices and comes down to that, but what would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a pat answer for you. This is where it all flushes out. I want to buy a house. I got to save so much for that. I want to get retirement going, and I realize there's tremendous power in saving early for retirement, because that gives me this 40 years. And am I saving to, the house is not a great way to build wealth. It comes with a lot of carrying costs, real estate taxes, utilities, repairs, maintenance. It's most people way overbuy on a house. Most first-time buyers can't even afford the 5% down payment. They got to get it from mom or dad. It's crazy. I think it's crazy. But again, that lifestyle, that's a big chunk, big step in that lifestyle. To reduce that or push it back in favor of retirement savings, where you're chunking in early, that's going to explode on you later, is just thoughts and observations. I can't answer it for you. I'm just trying to put it together. It's a balancing act, right? We all want it today, right? And the more we have discipline and the more we're serious about it, the better off we're going to be later on.
Just one more. This will be the last one.
You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to.
Watch out. Oh my gosh.
Oh, gosh. And that's time. Thank you, everyone.
Well, we got a wrap, right?
Yeah, we're over.
I was wondering, so you say it's very important to write down long-term goals, especially when you're young. When you were young, or a student or whatever, did you write down a bunch of long-term goals?
I did.
Did you succeed? Did they work?
I succeeded because writing them down puts you on a track that gets you closer and closer. Goals change all the time.
Okay.
But yeah, I was cursed with wanting to write down goals early on. Yeah, I'm a goal setter. Yeah. And some of that's personality, That doesn't mean the ones that don't have the personality get off the hook, just like I don't get off the hook for things that don't come naturally to me. But yeah.
Well, hey, I'm going to close us in prayer, and you're going to hang out for a while, right? So if people have questions for you or want to connect with you, please come up and talk to them and take him up on that offer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for this time here tonight. I thank you for bringing every single person here. Lord, I thank you for the table and for the blessing that it is to me and to so many in the room. Lord, I thank you that this is a safe place where we can talk about these sensitive and tricky areas of our life, areas like finances. Lord, I pray that you would give us the strength and the discipline to take a step. I pray that everybody here would walk away with one takeaway here tonight that they're going to implement And ultimately, Lord, I pray that we would walk away knowing that our finances are an indication of our heart and our love for you. Lord, I pray that everyone would be focused on honoring and glorifying you in this area of their life. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you are here for the first time, if you could fill out one of these cards, which are located right over there before you go, that would be awesome. 2 more things real quick. Really encourage you to take up Phil on meeting with him. I won't go into, I know what it used to be to meet with him. So like out of this, we're like giving our table the best by having that kind of access.
Was that a Freudian slip?
Tim, it was not. And the third, can we please show how much honor we have? Come next week. Love y'all. Take care. Goodbye. Stick around.
Stick around.